do. How would you like me to do that, Eric? What's the best way?
Yeah, if anything pops up, let's see, I got your video here on the side. If you just want to do like a little raise hand
Got it.
uh emoji thing, that'll probably be helpful.
Okay, cool. I'm going to mute myself.
Okay, we'll go from there. Well, hello everybody. Pleasure to meet you. I'm showing my screen. Yeah, everybody can see. We're good. Okay. All right. Yes, before we dive into it, I'm sure Dana's giving a little bit of an introduction, but I just want to give a little more context into who I am before we dive into it. I'm currently a senior software engineer and developer advocate at Yum Brands. I've been a developer for over a decade now, during which I've coded solutions for about 15 different companies, ranging from small startups to the Fortune 100, some of the bigger names I have listed here. For most of these roles, I was a software consultant. So not only was I actually coding and delivering the solutions that we were building, but I was often also asked to help in the hiring and staffing process for these projects. So about 3 years ago, and especially now, I noticed the job market for new devs is really rough. So I decided to package what I had learned and start paying it forward where I can. And just a few months ago, I started a podcast actually where I interview recently hired junior developers to give actionable job search advice that's current to today's market. So it's developers that were just hired within the last 3 to 6 months or so. So you see the link there. Please, shameless plug to like and subscribe, right? Yes, and I have to say thank you to Dana for letting me present here today. I know it's been a few weeks, months coming, so glad we can finally make it happen. If you have any questions, please throw them into the chat, and Dana will surface them to me. All right, so jumping into it then, I call this presentation Exploring the Unknown, because for most new developers, they don't really know what it looks like to work on a software development team. They just look for and apply to the software engineering role or web developer, when really there's a whole universe of possibilities out there. So we only have maybe an hour max today. I can't cover the whole universe of opportunities. So my goal is really just to open your eyes to some other roles that are within the software engineering space, to hopefully give you any idea of some opportunities that may be a better fit for you. First, just to set the stage, now in many ways is the best time to get into software engineering, but it's also a very difficult time to get into software engineering. There was a growth in software engineering jobs during the pandemic. More and more roles were digitized or automated, and there was more demand for companies to expand their e-commerce platforms, for example, and that all required engineering talent to build. And due to that demand, there was a surge in compensation, so that even with recent inflation, engineering salaries were still stellar and easily 2x the average household income in the United States. And then with the proliferation of information online, whether it's YouTube, Stack Overflow, ChatGPT, it's now easier than ever to gain a marketable skill set. So while that's all the case and you have a lot in your favor, there's still a lot that we're working against, right? Companies still expect too much from junior developers, whether it's proficiencies in multiple languages or several years of experience, even for an entry-level role. So we fight that fight, but there's also an inherent prejudice against non-traditional paths. It's getting better, but companies still show a preference for CS degrees over bootcamp grads. They may even get paid slightly less, so we're fighting that fight too. And then most recently with recession fears, the war in Ukraine, rising inflation, et cetera, a lot of companies are pulling back from hiring, or they're looking for fewer but more experienced developers. The junior market is shrinking there too. So I say all these things not to discourage you, but to help you understand that this isn't a normal job market. And so it's not enough just to be good at coding. You also need to be good at marketing yourself and leveraging your unique story. So I say you need to be strategic. So I just want to pause here. Help me understand the audience that we're with. Are you all in an education program? Are you all actively on the job search? What's the mix of folks that we're talking with here? Dana, or maybe in the chat here.
Yeah, and folks,
Where
you
are
can
you all
give
in your
yourself for
job
popcorn
journey?
style answers, but it looks like a lot of boot camp, job searching, boot camp grad, self-learning data science, boot camp grad, recent boot camp grad, just finished internship, actively looking, searching, self-teaching.
Okay, so good mix. It looks like a lot towards the actual job search period. Okay, so hopefully a lot of this resonates with you. If you've already put your resumes and applications out, you're kind of experiencing what we're talking about right here. So what do I mean when I say we need to be strategic? When it comes to the job search, let's first talk about what most developers do, right? They perceive the process as relatively straightforward. First, learn a thing, and then second, start searching for roles doing that thing. I'm not sure about on-ramp, but across the industry, I'd say the average time for a new developer to get the first job following this process is 6 to 9 months. So then after just a few months, why is no one hiring? Right? There's that tension, that frustration that you feel. That's because it's not just you doing this, right? You have so many other developers that are entering the job search from a variety of resources that it creates this funnel for the opportunities that are available. What it means is that most entry-level roles are flooded with hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants. At my employer, for example, this was a few months ago, but we had an opening for entry-level role that we took down after just it was 2 or 3 hours, because just within that time frame we had over 700 applicants, right? So what we need to do, since we're getting all of this load in, just like a system design, back-end development, you're getting all this load and this bottleneck into your system, we need to find a way to distribute that so that we're not all fighting for the same opportunities. So we want to find opportunities that, one, leverage your unique story, right? So if you're a teacher, you have a teacher background, maybe looking at roles in ed tech. If you came from the medical field, you're finding something in med tech. Because there's a common misconception here. I feel like a lot of developers think of. They think of their approach to software engineering as a career pivot. I would encourage you to not think of it as a pivot, but instead just a natural progression of your educational journey. So for example, somebody can go to school, we'll say bachelor's degree in psychology, and then go get an advanced degree or go to medical school. Is that a career pivot? No, that's a totally valid natural progression of their career path, right? Somebody can go to school for the same degree, psychology, and then go to law school. Is that a career pivot? No, it's a natural transition of their professional career. Somebody can go to school for psychology and then come back a few years later and get an MBA. Is that a career pivot? No, it's a natural transition of their career progression. So applying for software engineering roles that are relevant to the space that you're coming from is one way we can siphon off these opportunities to ones that help you better leverage and share your unique story. The other thing that we can do is finding roles that may actually be a better fit for your personality. So let's say, for example, if you're a very outgoing, bubbly personality, well, maybe something like consulting, where you're going to be engaging with clients, may be a better fit, as opposed to somebody that is maybe more reserved or introverted. Or if you've worked in a call center before, maybe starting off in help desk. All right, finding related roles that might be easier to get that first job in, instead of trying to jump straight to the end goal of software engineering. Because, hey, maybe you end up liking one of these roles even more to begin with. So to paint a picture about what all of these roles look like, here is what a typical software engineering team is. Every role inside the gray box is what I consider the software development team. The size of each team will vary from company to company. And for smaller companies, some of these roles are collapsed into a single person. But the people in green are typically the minimally valuable roles needed on a team. And the people in purple are sometimes embedded on the team, but they can also be separate. And the people in blue are advisory or support roles that typically are not embedded on the team, but they may still influence it directly. So rhetorical question though, can you spot the developers on the team? Right, they're actually make up a very small component of everything that it takes to make this possible. I put the star above the product owner. That's typically considered the leader role of the team. He or she is the one that determines the vision, the priorities for what the team will actually build. We'll go into some of these more granularly. As I mentioned earlier, I can't cover the whole universe of opportunities, but I'll try to target ones that I think might be easier for somebody, for a junior, to get into. And I'd like you just to think, could any of these roles potentially be a good fit for me? My hope being that they might influence some of the job opportunities that you apply for later as well. All right, so Scrum Master. So I like to think of these roles in 3 dimensions. There's a people, a process, and a technology. Each role is going to be a different mixture of those 3. This Scrum Master is primarily going to be a process person. The terms that you'll need to be familiar with are Agile development, Scrum, Kanban, Waterfall. Each is a different project management philosophy that has its own cadence of meetings, deliverables, and metrics. And this is the person responsible for enforcing that process. On smaller teams, this role can be absorbed by a product owner or a tech lead. But this role doesn't really hold any power. They can't say no to a requirement. They can't budget for new resources. They're just a process guy. So they have to use their informal influence to get anything done. So if you have a background in management or have always considered yourself to be persuasive or a good communicator, this could be a good fit for you. And if you have some context to software development, through a boot camp or a self-taught program or what have you, since you're going to be responsible for enforcing the processes that these teams use, having that knowledge of how systems work and how coding operates is going to help you be more effective in this position. Another role, the product owner. So this is the leader of the team, but this person doesn't necessarily have to be technical because they're focused mostly, once again, on people and process. In the context of game development, let's say, they would be the one gathering customer feedback on the game, researching the market, talking with other teams to figure out a combined way in how they can solve a problem. They would typically work closest with the designers on the team, deciding the look and feel of any product or feature. So they would need to be good storytellers and able to handle conflict as they're going to be fielding feedback from lots of different audiences, each with various opinions. So they have to be comfortable finding the signal through the noise and setting a clear direction for the team. Now, some of the product owners at Yum we call them technical product owners, where we have entire microservices that are products that we sell to our brands, KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. And the product owner is responsible for managing that API, the features that we build, and for selling it. So there's nothing visual that the product owner can really provide feedback on or know, but because our product owners, they're former coders themselves, or they have some insight into coding, they understand the general principles of how to design an API, or whenever the team pushes back on a requirement, they understand how the system is operating, since it's a little more amorphous, since there's no front end to it. So Great listener, great storyteller, comfortable saying no. Somebody that comes from a former leadership background or opinionated would also be a very good product owner.
Eric, just to pause there, somebody had a question. Is product owner the job title?
Product owner is the job title. Sometimes called product manager in some companies. But for each of the roles that we're talking about, there are junior, mid, and senior level versions of. So just like instead of applying to a junior software engineering role, you might apply to a junior product owner role, right? And this gets you embedded on the team, right? Sometimes the first step is learning how teams operate. And this can kind of get your foot in the door. And now that you're embedded with the team, it'll be easier to get that next role as a software engineer if that still interests you. Thank you. Great question. Yeah, I'm not monitoring the chat, so sometimes I just start talking away. So the next one, business analyst. So while the product owner is focused primarily on satisfying the customers of the game in this example and defining that roadmap, it's the business analyst who is responsible for translating the product owner's requirements into actionable work by the team. So they have to straddle a good understanding of, we'll say, the game's objectives or the website's objectives, as well as a technical understanding of how the system operates. They are usually the first ones to create an implementation plan for a feature. They would document the proposed approach, and they would help co-create the logical solutions and validate that they are working as expected. So anyone who is good at solving logic puzzles, likes using a whiteboard, this would be good for you. It's a pretty dynamic role, since a BA is so embedded in the requirements of a system, they can easily become or move into testing or product owner or scrum master role themselves, since they have to have that solid understanding of the system. And once again, you can be a junior business analyst, mid, senior level business analyst, and that could branch out into software engineering as well. In fact, my first, so I went the 4-year college traditional route. Since graduating, I've been a programmer my entire career, but my first internship was as a business analyst. And I still use a lot of the skills that I developed from that experience, even in my software engineering role today. Okay, developer relations. This is a relatively new field, but if you've ever seen someone giving a presentation about some service or some feature set, some SDK, some library that's been built, or maybe you've seen some developer blogs or thought about who writes the documentation for the websites or for the libraries that you leverage, that's typically somebody that falls under the developer relations umbrella. You'll mostly see them at very large companies or at companies who sell a digital product. So these are technical people who enjoy the social and community aspect of programming, often more than the programming itself. So in the context of gaming, again, they are usually connected with influencers, help plan, host tournaments, hosting hackathons, or they're developing plans to expand a certain market segment. So they're working closely with the sales or marketing teams. Career options here are typically pretty open. Evangelists typically talk more about the product to the audience. So if I was like an AWS developer relations, or sometimes they call themselves solution architects, they're evangelizing it externally to the company. Advocates are typically connected to the developers themselves. Developer experience are typically more internally focused, or maybe you're developing internal tools, doing internal demos, internal proof of concepts to support the developer teams. So for example, the developer experience team at Yum, they've built some logging libraries to make things easier for the teams to share. They've created tools to auto-generate some documentation that we use. They've even done the release pipelines to make the deployments easier, et cetera. They all would fall under the developer experience umbrella. And software consultant, this one I didn't really call out earlier in the grid because it really can encompass any one of these roles. It's more of a concept to your career path. It is probably 80% similar to a typical software engineering role. You are also programming most of the time. So software consultants have to be very technical. But 20% of the role is also very people-oriented and can be sales-oriented as well. Consultancies exist because of large projects. Maybe there's a large website that's being built, some service or mobile app that's behind schedule. The company wants to bring on some extra hires to help, but they don't want to just turn around and fire them if they were an employee just a few months later. So consultancies help with surge and decline in demand for short-term projects. And right now, I would even say it's a great time for developers getting to software engineering to consider consultancies as well. From what I've seen in the market, given the uncertainty with Fed rates or like the Silicon Valley Bank, when a company pulls on a full-time employee, there's some inherent risk there because you can be difficult to fire and let go if the company has a difficult time accessing money. But consultancies, though, that's what they're entirely built for. So from some of the anecdotally, some of the context that I have, I've seen an increase in hiring for consultancies and contract workers until the industry and things have kind of settled down, given some of the recent uncertainty.
Erik,
So who would this? All right, go ahead.
I just wanted to pause for a few questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Go. Yeah, stop me.
One was from Janine. I recently completed my product owner certification and I have no tech background. Would you have any recommendations to help me get better qualified to apply for product owner jobs?
Okay, you said yes, you have a tech background, or no, you have a tech background?
No tech background, but a product owner certification.
Yeah, okay, got it. So in it, probably 80% of product owner roles are going to be with some physical product, some SaaS solution that you have. So I would recommend getting better at design or understanding user-centered design, UI, UX, etc. If there's Udemy courses or what have you, because most likely you're going to be responsible for taking feedback from the customer and trying to create, what is the new customer experience going to be to solve that pain point? That's a good question.
There's a few more. Ian asks, what's the best way to go about the product designing or industrial engineer career paths?
Okay, industrial engineer is going to be more, okay. I'm not too sure about industrial engineer because that's more like that's not like digital typically, like websites and mobile apps, digital signage, etc. So best path there is similar to, I would say, for a software engineer, you go to get some education, whether it's through a boot camp or college. I would say similar deal for getting better at design would be a boot camp or some sort of educational program.
Great. Jin asks, software consultants would be similar to contract work. For example, no benefits are likely.
Great question. So consultancies is different than contracts in the sense that, so I spent the first 6 years of my career as a software consultant. I was employed by a company called Parveda Solutions. I had benefits. I had a 401k. I was a W-2 employee to Parveda Solutions. And then every 6 to 9 months, they would deploy me to a different project. Now I would work on site, and I listed some of the companies at the very beginning. I'd work on site at Toyota, solving solutions there. And I would have some internal meetings with the Parveda folks to make sure they were good. I got training from them on any new roles or new projects I was staffed on. But I had full benefits and I had full job security. So that Toyota would, quote unquote, fire me when the project was over, right? I would roll off the project and Parveda would have another one lined up for me and I would just go to the next one. Which made it very good for those who don't really know what they want to do with their life yet. Maybe you don't have a, do I like front end? Do I like back end more? Do I work for a large company, small company? Do I want to do like a mobile apps or web? I don't know. Consulting would be a perfect fit. Because as I mentioned, every 6-9 months, you'll be on some completely different company, working on a completely different tech stack, and you'll get lots of great exposure.
Thanks for that clarification. We have, two more questions. Edgar asks about being the consultant. Don't you have to be knowledgeable first, like past the junior dev level to be able to consult?
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing. It depends on the company, but consultancies make most of their money by hiring junior developers and then charging a senior developer rate. And actually, the more experienced you get as a consultant, the less margin the consultancies have. So they are financially motivated to hire junior developers and train them quickly, which makes them also great for new developers, so that they can be effective. This is where some of the emotional intelligence is there. There's an aspect of it where you have to posture and pretend you know more than you actually do. But that's the surprising thing about consulting, is that most consultancies position themselves as experts when they're probably less experienced than the developers that are actually on the team.
Insider info there. And then one last
That's right.
From Jasmine, what's your opinion on portfolios? For example, if you're interested in UX or UI web development?
UX, UI web development, I'll just make sure you have at least one solid project that showcases your skills. Front end heavy, right? And it better look pretty, right? If that's what you're advertising yourself for, as. I would say, in general, portfolios, make them easy to consume. What I mean by that is most recruiters are only going to spend, if just a few seconds skimming your resume. It's the same for skimming your portfolio. So I typically say your portfolio should have 3 things. It should be able to have some pictures. They don't have to go to a separate website, just on if it's a portfolio site or on a README in your GitHub. It should have pictures so that they can see what it looks like if they were to click on the link. Makes it easy to skim. You should have like a 1-minute demo, like a YouTube video, where you narrate or walk them through the features. And then if they're still interested, okay, sure, you have some dummy login credentials for your site or whatever, so that they can click around and explore themselves. But you have to have, I would say, at least those 3 things so that the recruiter can easily skim and dive deeper if they want to. Are we all caught up?
We're caught up for now. Great questions, everyone.
All right, great questions. I appreciate you throwing them in there. Okay, so yeah, we talked about emotional intelligence, talked about this is great for those that are starting their career. Oh yes, and then in response to one of the questions, talked about how consultancies are financially motivated to hire junior developers. And they typically like those with industry experience, because then they can sell it. So if you're a career transitioner, and let's say you spent 10 years in oil and gas, maybe working as some sort of business manager, well, hey, like, get a job in consulting the oil and gas industry and developing software for the oil and gas industry, because you just come across so much more knowledgeable, right? Also, their interviews tend to be easier, as they'll index more on consultant demeanor, or your ability to quickly pick up new technologies, and they'll index less on like data structures and algorithms, for example. So, and then yeah, career options, anything. So after 6 years in consulting, I wanted to jump out and kind of figured out what I wanted to do. But after 6 years, I had been on an AR, VR project. I had been on an IoT project. I had been on a front end and back end web project. I had been on a mobile app project. I had been a developer. I had been a QA. I had been a product owner. I had been a BA. Like a lot of consultancies will just staff you, or they'll prioritize hiring generalists that can quickly learn new things, and they'll just staff you wherever the client need is. So you get lots of exposure to lots of different things. All right, so I think this is the last one here, but this is another common intro role that I recommend: QA, or quality assurance engineer. This is the one responsible for testing the work that it was done correctly by the software developers. So in mature organizations, QAs may actually write more code than a software engineer actually does. Because while a software developer may have to implement a single feature, the QA engineers have to automate the testing of the developer's work. And it's not just the happy path, it's all the edge cases. So like if you were to create an account, an automated test case that makes sure that you obviously have to have a password. What happens if you have no characters? What happens if you have 1,000 characters in the password field? What if you have not enough special characters, or only special characters, or only numbers, or yeah, all the edge cases that could possibly happen. So really good for people that are detail oriented but creative, because you have to think through all those edge cases, but then also patient. I'll be honest, I've heard it can be tedious, which is actually one of the reasons why they're in high demand. The folks that are technical enough to do it well oftentimes just move into software engineering, which makes it a great career transition. I personally know 2 folks at my current employer who started in QA and are now software engineers. All right, so yeah, we didn't cover the whole universe of roles for a software engineering team on that one slide, but this highlights a lot of the ones that we just talked through that we had time to cover. And it walks through the different career progression for each specific role. It's really a simplification. You talk about left to right. You start by just being proficient yourself, and then as you progress to the right, become a leader in your organization. Really, there are dotted lines that go, all over the place, but the patterns here, I would say, represent what a majority of people's career paths look like. So one progresses from being responsible for theirs to responsible for others, and the size of the line shows the most common career path that I've seen people take. So the larger the line, the more people typically go down that path. Smaller lines near the end, as obviously not everyone is going to be an executive someday, so there's a limited number of those roles available. So that means most people will peak somewhere in the leads team or leads teams category. So I just want to pause here again and just give you a chance to think about your own career journey. We've talked this entire time about maybe the first role you can get. Let's also think about where you want your career to end, right? And if so, what questions do you have about what that path may look like? So I'll open it back up here. I know I've been talking this whole time, but does anything here jump out at you of where you want to end up and how you might make that happen?
We have a question in the chat box, Eric. Jalissa is asking, what about cybersecurity or computer security? Just graduated this month for psych, but planning to go back for a bachelor's in cybersecurity in fall. Is it better to get a computer science degree or computer security? And would you say, in your opinion, is this industry oversaturated?
Good question. I would say it's not oversaturated. I would say cybersecurity is not oversaturated. I would say it's actually, anecdotally, I don't have metrics to support this. So this is just, yeah, strictly my opinion. It feels like it's going to get more and more in demand. If you start talking about the conversation of Chat GPT taking over some development jobs goes hand in hand to me of the need for more cybersecurity analysts. Because if you have more and more people just putting in code into production that they don't understand, I feel like that's just going to expose so many more and more security vulnerabilities. And then you start talking about like AI taking over the world, and okay, companies are going to have to protect themselves, even more. So I see a growth in the cybersecurity world personally. Now you ask, computer science versus cybersecurity really depends on what your end goal is. So looking at this chart here, I do have security analyst on the far left, fourth from the bottom. I've only seen security analysts, you start off as an individual contributor, go into be a manager of cybersecurity. Maybe there's a director of cybersecurity where now you're over, a department or the whole organization. I've seen very few chief security officers. Oftentimes it just falls under the CIO or CTO role. So you'll probably peak somewhere at the manager or director level. But if that's what you enjoy doing, I mean, more power to you. The software engineer role is the most dynamic of all of them. I've seen developers, I know this graph calls out 3 primary routes. There's the solution architect, the staff engineer, and the manager route for a software engineer. But the software engineer, going back to the chart I showed earlier of the team, is the core part of it. And they, as such, are the most, have the most dynamic skill set that will let them branch out to any of the other options here. So it really just depends on where you want to go and how set you are in cybersecurity.
Got lots of questions rolling in.
All right.
Janine wants to know, this is awesome information. Will we be able to access your slides after the Zoom is over?
I can share it with you guys afterwards, sure.
Mm-hmm. Kayla says, how long would it take for a person to start as a QA tester and end up as a software engineer? How would I self-study to be a QA tester?
Yeah. So how long would it take? I would say, a year, 2 years. I mean, you would want to have at least that would be probably a reasonable expectation to get in there, get your hands dirty. And then I would even say being vocal at that employer, saying you want to go into software development. And then once they see your work ethic, right, they see how good you are at writing your code, then you can pivot into a software engineering role. I always want to make sure, if software engineering is your ultimate goal, that don't do QA for more than a year or two, because at a certain point, you're going to become so good at the QA role that if you want to go into software development, you may actually have to take a pay cut, right? So if you're at the management, director level, as at one point it's you're in, right? And you're going to feel a lot more pain if you now try to switch, because those paths are going to start deviating more and more as you get into more senior leadership. And then for the question about self-studying, really, if you're a good software engineer, like, I think you'll be a good QA. Like, I don't think there's anything specific that needs to be done. Maybe a Udemy course just to get familiar with some terminology. But I wouldn't expect you need to take like a 6-month or a 1-year QA boot camp, for example. If you can code and you're detail oriented, you'll be a great QA engineer.
We had a QA apprenticeship through OnRamp at SiriusXM Pandora.
Okay, great.
Our folks were given full-time roles in fall of 2022. Unfortunately, some of them were impacted by layoffs in February of this past year, and were hired almost immediately as software engineers at other companies. So
there we go. Yeah.
They were in QA for a little over a year and were able to leverage it, just
awesome.
anecdotally. Jen has another
Perfect. Thank you.
question. I actually have an entrepreneurial consulting background, not in tech, but really thinking about software consulting role now. Any suggestions for leveraging an entrepreneurial background for this?
Yeah, so a big part of consulting for software development is the sales component to it, right? So if you can talk about the relationships you developed, the accounts that you grew, how you resolved tensions with a client and grew an account, I think would all be great examples that you can leverage as part of your story. And it's another great example of that story may not be as powerful if you were to apply to a software engineering role, individual contributor, task-oriented, self-contained role. But to apply to a consultancy, they would eat that up, right? Now you have all these years of experience that you can pull forward and use to differentiate yourself. Wonderful.
Let's see, we have Curtis, would OnRamp have available programs for these roles? Yeah, we'll have more roles in the future. I'm not sure specifically in these fields. QA is one that may come up again. Devin is asking, I gained my AWS solution architect and Azure fundamental certification with no tech background and struggled to find a tech job. And recently I've completed free code camp certs in Python. What would you recommend in applying to certain roles?
Yeah. So the benefit so it sounds like it's just like a certification approach, a self-taught approach. And that's totally valid and it can happen. It's just going to be more difficult as you're seeing. So taking a step back, I would say, why are college degrees easier to get a job with? And that is you have a stamp of approval from a recognized organization that has relationships with employers that go back decades, right? There are funnels built in to go from a degree into an employer. Boot camps, these type of developer upskilling programs. Dana, you just mentioned that these QA with a Sirius XM FM. Sorry, I don't know. But OnRamp has relationships with employers that they can funnel you into. And you don't have to do a lot of the heavy lifting yourself of convincing a potential employer that somebody with your experience can be effective in that role. There's an entire alumni network that have already gone through the program and proven that they are great. So if you're self-taught, though, you don't have that network. So you have to build it yourself. And that's just a combination of being active on LinkedIn. When I say active on LinkedIn, I'm saying every day, right? I'm saying attending conferences. I'm saying finding multiple developer meetups and talking to folks there. Finding people at your target companies and private messaging them on LinkedIn, getting introductions to recruiters. You're going to have to just do that all yourself.
To assist with that, we are hosting another job searching in an uncertain climate talk on Monday at 3:00 Eastern through OnRamp. So feel free to sign up at onramp.io.
That is why I love OnRamp. You guys do a lot to support your network in this. Yeah.
So Laura has a question. What's the difference between freelancer and consultant? Couldn't freelancers also be considered consultants? What are some significant differences in their career paths?
Gotcha. Yes. So when I say consultant, I'm thinking you are an employee of a consultancy organization and you have some that overhead, that structure that is going to be finding projects for you and siphoning them to you. They give you the healthcare benefits. Whereas a freelancer, you're on your own. You might do some consulting. You're not going to have benefits. You're not going to have somebody doing the marketing for you. And you're going to be on your own. So that freelancer to founder, from what I've seen, there's a cap at a certain point as a freelancer, since your time is limited. You can only take on a certain amount of projects at a given time. If you really want to make more money, you either have to create your own company with your own product, or you partner with other freelancers. And at that point, you've pretty much just formed your own consultancy. Yeah.
Nadia asks, what job boards are best to watch for job postings?
Yeah, so for junior developers, that's the difficult thing, right? Even entry, no matter what job board you're looking at, 80% anecdotal, I'm just throwing a number out there, still ask for like 1 or 2 years of experience for entry level. Isn't that crazy? Right. So, okay, back to the junior jobs podcast I was talking about earlier. There was a junior developer I just interviewed, Rebecca, who she applied to the same company 3 different times, got rejected every time because of those requirements that she didn't have. She didn't have any experience. But it wasn't until she contacted a software engineer there, started a conversation thread. She got then referred to a VP of engineering. Then she was able to meet with the VP of engineering, and then was able to then meet with a hiring manager, then get an interview, and then she got hired, right? So junior developers, there are job boards out there you can apply, but that's what everybody else is doing, right? So this whole presentation is about finding jobs that are maybe not the software engineering ones, so you have less competition, you can leverage your prior experience. And for everything else, I would say, yeah, leverage your alumni network, leverage what on services OnRamp has, or try to reach out directly and try to see if you can get around the job application. Because a lot of recruiters, if you don't meet the minimum requirements, 1 year of experience, 2 years of experience, that's an automatic rejection, right? But if you can talk to them, sometimes you can convince them that you're good enough. That's the difficult kind of unique part of the current job market that you need to be successful.
Question from Nicholas. I'm interested in the Scrum Master role, having recent management experience, but my resume is all over the place. Hospital chaplaincy, archivist, marketing and design. Should I include all my experience and make an argument for how they feed into a role, or pick and choose?
I mean, all depends on what your story is, right? And when you list a line item on your resume, I wouldn't say, descriptions of what you did even 80% of the time. I would pick and choose the experience that is relevant to the Scrum Master role and highlight that in your job on your resume. Even if it's something you only did occasionally, just try hyper focusing your resume on that opening. And then I would even say that you can change, and this is a controversial take. So, okay, I'm going to drop a truth bomb here as somebody who's reviewed resumes and stuff, but you don't have to put the job title on your resume. It does not have to match the job title you actually held. I'll say that with an example here. So hear me out. I'm not saying lie. I'm saying be clear. I had a job before my current job as a software engineer where my title was consultant level 2. I got promoted and my job title was associate level 1. Associate is the same job title they give their grocery store workers at Walmart, right? That job title was not doing me any favors in helping me get a job as an in-house software developer. So on my resume, I changed my job title to say I was a mobile developer, and then I was a senior mobile developer, which was true. 80% of my time, I was coding mobile apps. And then I highlighted the experience in each line item in my resume, talking about the apps that I built. That got me more views on LinkedIn. That got me more responses to my resume. Was it lying? Yes, I guess technically, but in many ways I was clarifying, right? So anyway, I say, I don't know what your work history is, but consider potentially clarifying your resume so that it tells a consistent story.
Great. A few questions about OnRamp. Yes, we are going to be releasing more opportunities with the market as it is, many of our
Yeah.
hiring partners are on hold and just looking at things quarter by quarter, waiting for their hiring freezes to lift, but we're absolutely still in communication with them, waiting for that to happen. So please be on the lookout. As soon as we can offer them, you know that we are very eager to do so. So yes. And then let's see here. Yatunda asks, how do you feel about apprenticeships? A lot of reviews stated you were not taught the best practices. I'm hoping that's not a review of an on-ramp apprenticeship.
I mean, work experience is work experience. Even I would say, even if the day-to-day is not, you could technically be more effective programming 8 hours a day on your own, I would still take the apprenticeship. Because from a recruiter's perspective, we talked about minimum hiring criteria. And some of them will say, bachelor's degree or internship experience, or they'll say, bachelor's degree or equivalent experience. And if you don't meet the minimum requirements for the job application, you're going to get kicked out and you're not even going to be exposed to that opportunity. So oftentimes it's just about having a placeholder on your resume. If the apprenticeship isn't giving you the experience you need, it is giving you the line item you need on your resume.
Looks like we have,
question.
thanks. It was actually Google's apprenticeship. Phew. How do you, this is from
That was
Elizabeth.
close. Yeah.
How do you handle a job market that is seeking mid to senior level engineers? Juniors aren't even in consideration.
Yeah. So I would encourage you to listen to the Junior Jobs podcast. That entire podcast is interviewing junior developers that just got a job within the last 3 to 6 months. So they talk about what they actually did and what actually worked. And these are people that found jobs entry level during the peak of layoffs, late last year or early this year. Some principles that stand out from some recent interviews. So we talked, this entire presentation is about not doing what everybody else does, but then finding these more niche roles, right? One of the developers, Jacob Pixler, episode 4 or 5, he was very targeted in the roles that he was looking for. He looked for only something that was within like 20 to 30 miles from where he currently lived, which was an interesting idea. The more broad your job search is, also the more competition you have if you're looking all over the United States or all over the world. When he narrowed his search, he found very, very small, very, very niche companies that were typically, would be on the last page of the search results when he did a generic search. So they got surfaced up to the top when he narrowed his search as specific as he could. And that is how he found his current job. And then once again, he messaged the software engineers at the company directly. He messaged the recruiter directly, asked if there's anything he could do to stand out, and was able to land an interview and then got a job.
I just shared Erik's LinkedIn URL in the chat, folks. You can find all of the work he's doing, podcast links and such there.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, there's a link at the very top, like job search tools and services is at the top of my LinkedIn. You click on that. They got a whole bunch of links for all my socials and stuff that you can leverage.
We have just a few more minutes and a few more questions. There is a question about on-ramp boot camps. They're not on any particular cycle. When our hiring partners are ready to open, we open up. So as long as you're on our mailing list or following us on social media, you will see, because I will post obsessively to make sure as many people as possible know about these opportunities. So just make sure you're following us on Twitter, LinkedIn, or you have joined our mailing list, which you can do via our chat bot on our site. Amadou asks, any recommendations for international students looking to get a job that would be able to sponsor their work visa?
Yeah, I would say the first thing, or first I would say some context here. Most United States companies are not set up with the legal or the government requirements necessary to hire employees from other countries. So Some are, like the big names, Facebook, Google, they have large legal departments, HR departments that can handle all the paperwork that is necessary, right? To sponsor somebody. So I would say if you're in an international market, the first thing I would do is to try to identify the large multinational companies that work in that country. And then it's easy once you're, well, easy, not easy. It's possible. It's easier, I should say. Once you work for that company in your local market, to then request a transfer to another country, blah, 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 whatever you need. And then as far as identifying companies in the United States that do sponsoring, if you're in the United States and you need to maintain a sponsorship, I don't know if I have a good resource for that to share. I would just say my general answer is typically LinkedIn. I know I've seen several posts on there where people have mentioned that they need a job with sponsorship, and then they can get responses right from the community. That would be the first place that I would look.
Great. Access to the Zoom meeting or recording will be in your OnRamp dashboard. So if you do have an OnRamp account already, when you sign in, you can access recordings to all of our past events. If you don't have an OnRamp account, it's free and easy. All you have to do is enter your email address and make a password, and you'll have access to this in all future and past recordings. It looks like
so there was a question. Oh, so I just want to clarify then I don't have to share anything after. There was a question about sharing this information later. Just check whatever resource she just mentioned and you'll have it.
That's the way. And by creating an OnRamp dashboard account, you will also be added to our mailing list. So you will automatically be notified anytime we have new opportunities. You'll also be added to the mailing list for upcoming events like this so that you can RSVP and never miss one. And we're right at time. I think this is probably a good time to cut it off. I think we hit all the questions. Erik, do you have any closing remarks that you'd like to make?
I was just going to say, I guess, two things. First is this whole conversation that we just had is one session in a 9-session workshop that I have about job search. So if this was interesting to you at all, please let Dana know. I'd be happy to come back and circle up and talk any more detail about how you can get more interviews, pass more interviews, or how to sell yourself more effectively. And the last thing is QR code here again. I know I've made it a couple of times, shameless plug. I have accumulated some of the knowledge and findings from my conversations working with junior developers, but I love the Junior Job Podcast because it helps you hear from your peers in their own voice, their struggles, and their success. So you're not in this alone. Many people dumber than you have done it. So I'm sure you can do it as well. But thank you for letting me join.
Thank you so much, Erik. And thank you for everyone who came and participated today with your questions and your time. Putting this time into yourself is only going to improve your chances in the job search. And yeah, please be on the lookout. We have more great events coming up next week and beyond. Erik, I'm sure we would all love to have you back. I'll follow up in an email to talk about that. And wishing everybody a great weekend. Thanks again.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Bye.